one and all. Welcome to this edition here of Kitz Corner. So we saw the madness that came with the speakership vote, and when right-wing, fringy Republicans were able to force the vote, which is the strategy that was presented to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and they refused to do so, which is challenge their speakership vote to get something passed forward or hold challenge or hold accountable to the party, saying that I'm withholding my vote until you do something for me. Turns out it worked well for the fringe right-wing Republicans, but the progressive wing of the Democrats completely shit the bed and didn't do anything about it. And they're still demonizing people for mentioning force the vote. So we saw that in action. We saw the madness that came to vote after vote after vote after vote. And then Kevin McCarthy just became Speaker of the House. I guess they were just given up by it. But what we saw here, and what progressives should have took notice about this, was how this method actually played out and worked in favor of right-wing Republicans. And progressives did the same thing. The Squad, Bernie, Ro Khanna, people like them were able to implement this 2 years ago during the pandemic when Nancy Pelosi needed the votes. We could have had a optimized strategy to actually push forward progressive values and movementation. We didn't do any of that. In fact, they're still continuing to demonize people like Jimmy Dore, who really just brought attention to this from the DSA, which is their own strategy, and brought to attention that, hey, maybe we can get Medicare for all during a pandemic situation if we do something like this. It's just political 101. But no one is more frustrated than, obviously, the establishment politicians, the neocons, the neolibs, especially people of the war machine, because one of the things that forced the vote for the Republicans, what they wanted out of it, was a cutback for the Pentagon and the war machine. And that is troublesome for neocons and neolibs alike, including someone like Dan Crenshaw. So this gentleman here, who you've seen multiple times, he is a typical war neocon buffoon. He is basically the embessence of John McCain in an eye patch. And he is frustrated as hell. He is notoriously outraged on people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and other Republicans that were actually welcoming the idea of cutting back the military budget and using their leverage, using their power to withhold their vote for speakership until that message was addressed, until that provision was brought to attention. And people like Dan Crenshaw were freaking out about this. And he responds to CNN. Take a listen to this.
A handful of members is very clearly looking for notoriety over principle. That's what it is. And anyone who suggests differently is in some kind of make-believe fantasy reality. It's not true. They lost those debates. That should have been the end of it, because that's how a team works, right? You hash this stuff out, you figure it out, and then you move on. But if you're a narcissist, and you believe that your opinion is so much more important than everyone else's, then you'll keep going. And you'll threaten to tear down the team for the benefit of the Democrats, just because of your own sense of self-importance. That's
I feel like I'm watching a rendition of Divorce Court right here. I feel like this is some sort of custody battle. Like, did Dan Crenshaw used to date these mega Republicans? They're narcissists. Like, they're just mean. They're meanie heads. And they're not helping the system. They're not helping our marriage. And I swear one of them slept with my sister. This is like the aftermath, like, you know, when you watch, like, courtroom dramas, the People's Court, Judge Judy, those ones, and they, like, walk out and they talk to the one person hosting and they ask questions about how they think the case went. It feels like one of those moments. Like, how do you feel like it went? Well, they're a bunch of meanie heads. They hold people accountable, and they're just doing it for narcissism. They're meanie heads. Why can't they just comply with the war machine and kill more people? Why do they have to hold things accountable? Ugh. That's not good for me. Dan Crenshaw, famous neocon.
Exactly what's happening here. We will not vote for anyone else but McCarthy. These people think they're stubborn, we're more stubborn. They think they're not going to get the communities they want. Well, obviously they won't, but it's going to be so much worse than that. You know, they are enemies now. They have made it clear that they prefer a Democrat agenda than a Republican one.
So, because they're agreeing with something that also the left would agree on and would actually unify the country together, because I think majority of America can all agree that we have an extremely bloated military budget that we're spending on bloodshed and tyranny all across the world, creating new enemies because really we're not at war with anyone. That's apparently a sign of an enemy for Dan Crenshaw. Apparently you're now an enemy if you have something that the majority of the country agrees on, whether you're left or right. I thought that was the whole point of a politician. I thought the whole point was to reach out to everybody. If you have a policy that helps every single person, wouldn't that make you a beneficial politician? That means, hey, maybe some Democrats or former Democrats or people that were exiled from the Democratic Party are going to look at people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and others that are trying to challenge this and move forward and also put pressure on the FBI. Maybe they're going to look to them and say, okay, I'll give credit to you guys. I'll give credit to this party for at least trying this. But Dan Crenshaw, so butthurt, disgusted. Oh, the horror, the pain. They're narcissists. I swear, those two, I swear, like, did they date? Was there a bad setting where they went on a horrible date? Like, what happened here? And it gets even worse. So then he goes on to this radio show here. And I swear to God, I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like this is the 7 signs of grief. Like, I feel like this is the 7 signs out in the open. Because Dan Crenshaw, of course, adores Kevin McCarthy. Because Kevin McCarthy is basically no different than Nancy Pelosi or any other, you know, multi-millionaire politician that fundraises off lobbyists. Same with Hakeem Jeffries. Same with any other politician. And he is outraged and frustrated that politicians are willing to hold account to other politicians within their party. He is furious and outraged to the point that now they're considered enemies, and it gets even worse. So take a listen to this.
Get another scalp, whether it's Boehner or Paul Ryan or then McCarthy. Scalise would just be next, and we all know it. We just can't allow that to happen. That's why those of us are saying, like, look, you pushed us into this corner, so now we're saying we won't vote for anyone but McCarthy. That's why we're saying it, because we cannot let the terrorists win. That's basically what's happening. Get another scalp.
So now you went from enemies to disagreements to terrorists. You're calling your own colleagues terrorists. This is, I can't believe this. I can't believe this, that it has gotten to this point where, you know, now because Republicans are seeing the, you know, the influence of these people that are kind of outsiders and want to get away from, you know, the lobby groups and the corruption and stuff like that and focus on fundamental policies. I may disagree with those fundamental policies, but at least I admire the effort, I admire the courage, I admire the fact that they took force the vote and ran with it. Now they're being called terrorists. So I guess if you're a Democrat and you're outside the party line, you're considered a Russian operative. If you're a Republican and outside their operation, you're considered a terrorist. So he is completely melted down, butthurt, insanely, like, confused. Oh, my God. Like, how could you do this? Next, they're going to go after Boehner, and they're going to put him in the corner. No one puts Boehner in the corner. Then they're going to go after Scalise. Then they're going to go after this guy. They're just not going to stop. They're not going to stop. That was from Dan Crenshaw, the crazy ex of the Republican Party, I guess. I swear, it sounds like the crazy ex, you know, stalker that's like so angry and pissed off, but then, seeing all the 7 signs of grief going through this process, which now leads to acceptance. So now Dan Crenshaw had some time to think it over, had some time to realize, take it all in, give it a moment, breathe. And now he's just trying to, move on for this. And this is what he said to Jake Tapper of CNN.
Look, things get heated and things get said. Obviously, to the people who took offense by that, it's pretty obvious that it's meant as a turn of phrase it's
a metaphor.
It's in the context of intransient negotiations. I've got pretty thick skin. I'm called awful, vile things by the very same wing of the party that I'm fighting. I was fighting at that moment, so I was a little taken aback by the
sensitivity.
Yeah, by the sensitivity of it, but. To the extent that I had colleagues that were offended by it, I sincerely apologize to them. I don't want them to think I actually believe they're terrorists. It's clearly a turn of phrase that you use in what is an intransient negotiation. Look, things get heated and things get said.
So I just want to apologize for, blasting them and calling them terrorists and saying they're, destruction and evil and all this stuff. I'm just going to take a moment because... I don't know. I'm just very emotional right now. I just don't know how to deal with the pain and suffering that I had to deal with. I mean, holding people accountable for political action and trying to get provisions through that would actually benefit the majority of the country. As a neocon, it hurts. It hurts my feels. Oh my God. That is funny. That is funny. And this is probably the most I'm enjoying all of this because, all in all, Speaker of the House, it's all a bunch of billionaire, millionaire types. They hang around lobby groups. Really, it's not going to matter if it's Kevin McCarthy or Keem Jeffries. Either side is not going to, stick up for you, the working class person. Same with Dan Crenshaw. Same with, other mainline Republicans, Democrats, so on and so forth. They have completely turned the blind eye against you. They completely gave you the cold shoulder for years now. Nothing's going to change. But the most I'm excited about this is finally it took, fringy right-wing Republicans to do something that the rest of us were yelling at the progressives, the squad, the AOCs, and the Bernie Sanders that they campaigned on bringing the ruckus. It took outsider Republicans to force the vote. And we saw it in action. We saw the effects of it. It actually worked in benefit with them. And it could have worked better with the progressive movement. And we could have got Medicare for all. We could have brought attention on infrastructure. We could have brought attention to student debt relief. They didn't do any of that. They didn't do any of that because AOC believed it was violent. It was violent against Mama Bear to question her and withhold her speakership vote until she actually does something for the American public. It is apparently violent. Or in Dan Crenshaw's case, you're apparently a terrorist. This is like a soap opera circus on steroids when you hear stuff like this. So that's Dan Crenshaw, but I also want to turn attention to what the progressive wing thinks about all this. So here's Ro Khanna, for example. Ro Khanna featured on Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar, but this is the alternative version, I guess. This is the one with Ryan Grimm because, Crystal Ball, who I used to look up to and thought she was a decent person, has now become a millionaire, backed average reporter, average journalist. Same with Sagar, and they did this show, whatever, and they thought they were supposed to be outsiders, but turns out they're just want to be Democratic insiders. They hire someone like Ryan Grimm to work on this show. So now Ryan Grimm, that works at The Intercept, corresponds with the TYT, and now doing counterpoints here, Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar. Of course, because they want access. They want access to people like Ro Khanna and AOC, and that's why they, discriminate against progressive policies. That's why they went after people that were questioning the war narrative of Ukraine. That's why they went after people that were bringing attention to, the Medicare for all rallies. That's why they were going against, Ryan Grimm going after the truckers. And now they're going to interview Ro Khanna here. Ryan Grimm's going to interview Ro Khanna about what he feels about, them using force the vote, how they ignored it 2 years ago, and maybe they might consider trying this for themselves. So they ignored 2 years ago. We saw it happen with the Republican Party, outsiders of the Republican Party, and now they're asked by Ryan Grimm if it might work for them 2 years later, maybe. But take a listen.
If Democrats take the House back in 2 years, which seems plausible, it'll probably be by a narrow margin. Is there any thinking going on in the Progressive Caucus now to say, what are we going to demand when that comes around?
Oh, well, Hakeem Jeffries was...
So let me just point out the obvious. Ryan Grimm, could they pick a more monotone person? Like, if two years from now the Democrats may win the majority or not and kind of maybe somehow do this, do you think that they will have the leverage to do so? Wow. What a great interviewer. His voice matches his toupee. It's just so bland and pointless. It is just so bland and pointless. So, of course, Ryan Grimm saying, well, maybe in 2 years. Why? First of all, why wait 2 years? You had the opportunity. You had the golden opportunity of the pandemic where everybody was dying. They needed Medicare for all. And it was the perfect opportunity for Bernie, you, AOC, the squad, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, all of them to hold back their votes on Speaker of the House to actually get something forward, which is exactly what outside Republicans were doing, but they refused to do so. They refused to do so. Ryan Grimm said it was violent. AOC said it was violent. How dare you do something like that? TYT demonized its own audience for bringing it up, and their audience reacted to it and turned against them. So, of course, that got followed up with a laugh by Ro Khanna. You saw it there that they mentioned about, are you gonna plan some action? Are you gonna do this with your own party? And Ro Khanna laughs because of course not. They're not planning on helping people. They're not planning on holding people accountable. They're now the war corporate party. They're the everything Republicans used to be. And they're still holding to that. I mean, Ro Khanna's wife profiteers off of the defense stocks. Do you think that Ro Khanna is going to step up against Nancy Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries or any one of his Democratic members to actually get something for the American public that's unifying everybody? No, because Ro Khanna's a good little boy. AOC's a good little girl because now she's in a comfy position. She's in a lovely, state as a congresswoman, and she doesn't want to leave her position. She wants to climb that corporate ladder, so of course she's got to be nice to everybody. And people that want to challenge their fellow members apparently get told it by HR to Dan Crenshaw. But here's the rest of it.
Board by Kevin McCarthy, right? He said, I had a unanimous vote 2 years ago. Look, I think there are arguments for it. For example, Medicare for all, to get hearings on that, to get a vote on that.
There are arguments for Medicare for all. There are arguments. That's the Democratic response. Look, there are arguments to be made about health care for people that pay their dues in society, and the fact that medical bankruptcy is the highest rate in the United States, one of the most developed nations on the face of the earth. And since every other developed nation has some sort of basic health care system, I think there could be an argument to be made about universal health care. That's Ro Khanna. Ro Khanna. who's completely out of touch that he doesn't even realize, yeah, there's more than arguments to be made about Medicare for all. You realize people are marching and protesting and demanding. That was the whole point of Force the Vote, you idiot. The whole point of Force the Vote was to see if you guys would actually hold accountable and stick to your guns and follow through for the American public that got you into office. It was not about insulting or creating violence or doing anything like that. It's about holding people accountable and seeing who will actually follow through when it comes to representatives and how they'll actually represent.
But here's the difference, and I believe the fundamental difference with the Freedom Caucus and the Progressive Caucus. The Freedom Caucus, by their own definition, just wants to blow things up and cut things. I mean, that's why they're in Congress. And I disagree with it. I'm not questioning their motives. They're in Congress because they want to reduce spending, cut government. That's an easier thing to be a no on than saying, okay, we want Medicare for all, which is we have to have legislation, draft it, and just say it's a harder thing to do when you have an affirmative agenda. So
yeah, it's a harder thing to do. I mean, you have to write notes and then you have to draft a bill. I wish there was some way that someone already drafted a bill and it's been waiting on Nancy Pelosi's desk for the last 3 freaking years. If only there was someone that could actually get that bill noticed and forward and actually signed off that could actually bring it to action. If only there was someone that courageous. But who in the Democratic Party could ever be that creative and courageous? My God, this is the dumbest interview from Ro Khanna. Like, we can't do Medicare for all; it's too hard. But these Freedom Caucus people, they just want to blow shit up and they want to reduce spending. First of all, I never heard anything about blowing stuff up. Where's that coming from? That just seems like a talking point out of the DNC. They just want to blow things. What exactly does that mean? That they want to investigate the FBI? Is that blowing things up? They want to reduce the war budget? Is that blowing things up? And like I said, there are things to disagree with the fringe, Republican sector and the Republican Party. But like I said, it's not primarily about that. It's about getting the courage and stamina to go against the machine, to actually move provisions forward. And that's what people like Ro Khanna and the Squad and Bernie and all those individuals completely clueless and oblivious on. They clearly don't understand the whole point of all of this. The whole point, even if we didn't get Medicare for all passed, the whole point of it was to see which candidates and which politicians are actually standing by the people that got them elected, or the people that lobby for them. Are they with the machine? Or are they with the people? That's what we're trying to find out through Force the Vote. That's why it was a win-win situation. Because now we know the people that were against Medicare for all, the people that didn't want to do Force the Vote, are with the machine. Ro Khanna is with the machine. AOC is with the machine. Bernie Sanders is with the machine. They were never about the people. They completely turned a blind eye, screwed them over, gave them the cold shoulder, and told them to go bugger off. And now they're war pushers. Now they're, profiteers. Now they're pledging for more money to the most corrupted nation in Eastern Europe while people are starving out in the street, becoming homeless. How poverty is skyrocketing. Inflation's getting worse. And it's going to get worse to come. And Ro Khanna completely oblivious to what just happened right in front of him.
That progressives are never going to be blow up government or let's just hurt government. But are there lessons in terms of saying we want more progressives on certain committees, we want certain bills to come up for a vote? Sure. I mean, I think that those are things that progressives should consider.
They should consider. Why didn't they consider that 2 freaking years ago? Every single person was pledging you to do Force the Vote. Every single person that got you into office was pledging for you to force the vote. Because that strategy is politics 101. That strategy would have got things forward. That strategy would have showed your leverage and showed the American public that the progressive wing was not a failure, which it is. That the progressive wing is not just a psyops, which it is now. It would have showed the American public that you actually give a damn about the people, which clearly they don't. Clearly they goddamn don't. And it took fringy Republicans, Lone Bobart, Matt Gaetz, and people like Jim Jordan to come to the plate to take force the vote and run with it with their own policies, and it worked. It worked. But Ro Khanna and the rest of the squad and people and Bernie and the rest of the Democrats completely oblivious to it because they're beholden to the establishment, just like Dan Crenshaw. That's why he's, being Mr. Pouty Pants over the fact that holding politicians accountable for their actions and seeing if they actually have the leverage to move things forward is considered an act of terrorism and not an act of motivation and not courageous, not something that every politician should be going towards. Every single politician should be going towards that because that's politics 101, baby. That's politics 101. I'm not willing to vote for you unless you're going to get something out of unless you do something for the people that got me into office. That is politics 101, baby. And none of these people understand that. But it took Matt Gaetz to stand up against the machine and say, you know what? I'm withholding my speakership until I get my provisions passed. And it worked. It goddamn worked. And Ro Khanna completely oblivious to it. And people like Ryan Grimm completely oblivious to it. Because Ryan Grimm doesn't hold people accountable. Ryan Grimm just wants access. He just wants to talk with Ro Khanna. That's why they're saying, oh, well, maybe in 2 years, maybe you could do something about this. A regular journalist would have said, hey, why didn't you do this 2 friggin' years ago? Why did you do this when it mattered? Why did you not force the vote when you actually had the chance and had the leverage and actually had the people to do something about it? And it could have won. It could have won easily. But that's why they're the fraud squad. That is why Ro Khanna is a slick, sleazy, sly of a politician. Because he pretends to go on these, independent shows like Breaking Points here that, makes millions of dollars. He pretends to go on these shows and pretends to still be the outsider, even though he's an operative of the Democratic machine. He's for the war. He's not going to change. He's not going to change. And that's why he laughed when Ryan Grimm said to him, are you going to take this and are you going to do something similar with the Democratic Party? And Ro Khanna laughed because he knew that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen with the Democrats. It's not going to happen with establishment Republicans. And that's why they're angry and pissed off and going through the motions like whiny 2-year-olds about holding people accountable. Which is why this is just such a laughable riot circus. And it's just showing the American public and the rest of the world who they really serve. Their masters or the people. Who do they really serve?